So I'm going to introduce another type of power chord today called it's called a sixth chord. I've already talked about a power chord called a fifth chord. If you're not familiar with that, have a look at my my other video. I'll put a link as ever in the description. But we're going to have a look at something called a sixth power chord and how we can use it alongside the fifth power chord to create a really simple riff like the one that I've just played. What I've just done is use literally just those two chords in a very simple pattern and arrangement. The part that I've played is, just for the record, it's called a 12-bar progression, sometimes called a 12-bar blues progression. You might have heard of it. It gets its name for the simple reason that there's 12 bars in it. That's a 12-bar progression. If we were to play it in a blues style, then that would be a 12-bar blues. I'll at the end of the video I will explain why the sixth chord is the sixth chord and the technical sort of theory bit behind it. But I want to get straight into the exercise, how to play it so you can get playing and get enjoying these chords and being able to give it that sort of rock and roll, classic rock type of sound. So I'm going to go down into the close-up and get on with the exercise. Hopefully you'll be able to see it clearer from there. So to get started with, on the pattern I just played, I'm going to begin with A5 power chord in my open position. So what does that mean? That means I'm going to use my open A string as my root note, and then I'm going to produce my 5 power chord by fretting my 2nd fret on my D string just there. So I've got my open A string and I've got my 2nd fret on my D string together. That's my A5 power chord. You should know that from the previous video. So moving on from there, to get my 6th power chord, which is what I'm looking at today, rather than playing the note on my 2nd fret of my D string there, I'm going to play the note on the 4th fret. Now what I don't want to do is I don't want to be moving my hand around from my 2nd fret to my 4th fret in that fashion, because I won't be able to play the riff that way. What I do want to do is use another finger. In this case I'm using my 3rd finger to play the 4th fret on my D string. So for my 5th chord, my 5th power chord, I'm playing my 2nd fret there with my 1st finger along with the A string. For my 6th power chord, I'm going to use my 3rd finger to play the 4th fret on that same D string along with the A string. So if we take the A string out of the story for a minute and just concentrate on those two notes that we change in between, that's my 5th and that's my 6th. My 5th and my 6th. When we include the A string to make it the chord, so I'm playing the A string the same on both the 5th chord and the 6th chord. The only thing that's changing is whether I'm fretting my 2nd fret there or my 4th fret. You might have noticed when I was playing the chords there, my 5th chord, my 6th chord. 6th chord doesn't sound quite as nice as the 5th chord. That's for a reason. It's not really a chord that's designed to be sort of sat on for any length of time, that you would play and leave like that. It's sometimes called a passing chord because we only stay on it for a short amount of time, like I did in the riff. So putting those two together, the 5 and the 6, to put together the riff that I played at the start of the video, I was doing a pattern from the 5th to the 6th. So I was going. So I was playing my 5th chord once, then my 6th chord once, then 2 quickies on my 5th, then my 6th again. If you want to count it, it would be 1, 2, 3 and 4. 1, 2, 3 and 4, 1, 2, 3 and 4. That's the pattern that I was playing at the start of the video. I played it in a couple of different positions, well not positions, a couple of different keys. So I played it in A, D and in E. But the really cool thing about this exercise is we can do that using that same shape and that same position. And I'll show you what I mean. But before we move it, just be confident in playing just that first one on the A string with those other notes on your D string. So there. Again, as ever, slow it down to a pace that you're comfortable with your metronome if you need to. Just to get the concept of it and get the feeling of it into your fingers. When I just played it through then, I wasn't using any muting or anything, I was just letting the chords ring. When I played it at the start, I think I used a little bit of muting just to cut out the notes from ringing on too much. So playing it without the muting, just added a bit of muting to that. I've talked about muting before, I'll put a link to that as well, but you can either use your fingers of your left hand or you can use the palm of your right hand, whatever you're comfortable with, just to give it a little bit more feel in the riff. Now, once you're comfortable with that, in that position, what else have I played? Well, I've played the exact same thing, but rather than starting in my A string, I've moved everything across a string to my D string, and then I've used the same frets, second and fourth frets, on the string lower on my G string. So I've gone. That was one of the other chords. The final one, I moved up to my E string, played my open E string, and then used my second and fourth frets on my A string. And those are the only three positions, if you will, that you need to replicate that 12-bar progression. I will describe the progression. It's quite simple. There's only 12 bars to it. And when I say a bar, I mean this is a bar. That's one bar. So when I play through the progression, that segment is one bar of it. So I'll play it through now across the 12 bars, and I will, as I say, I'll put in the description which position, which chords you need to be playing at which point in the 12-bar sequence. It seems fairly straightforward. Obviously it would do to me because I'm familiar with it, but it's really nothing to be afraid of. It's nothing complicated. So I'm going to start off with the A one. I'm going to play that 4 times. I'm going to play the D one twice, then back to the A one. I'm going to play that twice. Then I'm going to play the E one, the D one, the A one, and the E one. So if you watch along and try and count along to the 12 progression as I'm playing it, you'll be able to see, hopefully, which ones I'm using at which stage in the progression. We'll start off with bar 1 using the A. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then you'd repeat. A 12-bar progression repeats. After 12 bars it plays the same thing again and again and again. So hopefully you'll be able to see what I've done there in terms of I'm using exactly the same, but just moving it across different string positions. So all the patterns in that example, that exercise I've used, I've made use of open strings. So what I've done effectively is, with these 5th and 6th chords, I've played them in the open position. Now, in a previous video I talked about power chords. One of the benefits of power chords is the fact that they're movable chords and we can play the same shape all over the neck, up and down, wherever we want to, without having to learn different shapes. The reason why I've introduced them in the open position is quite simple, is because it avoids you having to worry about the stretching element that we might have to have a look at when we take to moving these 5th and 6th combination chords, which I'm going to cover in another video using these movably. But playing in the open position, I can just concentrate on getting the actual sounds of the chords right and moving positions around a couple of different strings. If I was to play, I was playing in A, D and E there. I'm in the key of A there for that 12-bar progression, you don't have to worry about that. If I was to play the same progression in, let's say, the key of G for example, I'm going to use the same chords. So that's going to be my 5th chord. I described it in the other video using positional play to play it. Now when I come to transfer it to move to a 6th chord, I need to either get my little finger up there, or I need to do the stretch between 1st and 2nd fingers. So hopefully you can see, looking at my hand there, there's a fair stretch. That's probably one of the, well, the worst ones probably do it in F. So just look at the stretch that I'm having to perform there. It's something that's perfectly doable. Obviously I'm doing it. You can build up to it, so it's perfectly doable by you. But I didn't want that to become an obstacle to developing your knowledge of these chords to start with. I'm building up to using these in a song that's been a student request. I'm not going to tell you what it is now. It'd be a bit of a surprise for the guys that's asked for it. But we need to use these type of chords. So I've used open strings just to prevent you from having to worry about the stretching aspect for now. We'll need to probably do that later. But once you've got the idea of it in your head, you learn one thing at a time. You're comfortable with knowing how the chords work, getting the rhythm right, and then when we come to the stretch, you only have to worry about one thing, which is the stretching element of it. As with everything, if you want to try them like I just did in the other shapes, feel free. But be careful, you don't hurt yourself. Make sure you're properly warmed up, and maybe do a little bit of finger stretching before you attempt it if you're not used to stretching your fingers out wide. The last thing you want is to to damage yourself and be in a position where maybe you can't play for a while, or even worse, you get some kind of an injury. That's the last thing that I want, so make sure that we're careful about that. Finally, I just had to explain where the 6th chord gets its name from. In my 5th chord video, I told you that the 5th chord gets its name because it's a combination of 2 notes from the major scale. It's the 1st note of the tonic note and the 5th note of the scale. So in this pattern that I've used on this video, we started off with the A chords. So let's have a look at the A major scale. First 5 notes. So my first note, obviously, that's going to be A. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's where the 5th chord gets its name from. The 6th chord gets its name because we're using the 6th note of the major scale. So rather than the, we're going to carry on to the 6th note. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, it doesn't really work as a chord because I've had to go down to another string there, but if I was to stay on the same string and try and find that 6th chord on my A major scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and that gives us our 6th shape. Exactly what I was playing on the open string position. But you can see that playing it on the 5th position, I'm having to use a stretch there to cover the notes. So I'll do these movable stretchy ones in another video, but this for now, we'll stick with the open position ones just to get the idea of using the 5th and 6th chords combined. Enjoy.